Adab, Namaskar, good evening. This evening is going to be a journey into another world of a culturally very, very robust world, of a politically difficult world. We start the evening with कल ही बसंत पंचमी थी, तो उस जमाने में ख्याल, ठुमरी, दादरा, तराना ये सब आ चुका था हमारे कल्चरल लैंडस्केप में। तो आज की शाम का आगाज मैं राग बसंत में एक तराने से करना चाहूँगी। तराना it's a melody that doesn't have words. It has vocals. So it has a note, tom, tana, note, etc. But it has the mood. So आप सबसे इजाजत लेते हुए राग बसंत में तीन ताल में तराना पेश करते हैं।
In 1803, this great city, master of Hindustan for 800 years, was conquered rather improbably not by a warlord or a nation state, but instead by a multinational corporation. The East India Company was owned by its shareholders. It had annual general meetings. It had a share price. And as the battles and parades and bars continued, the share price went up and down, like the heartbeat of a human being. It was the thing that kept the corporation going, fed by loans from Marwari bankers, and guarded by, again, hugely improbably, an army of Indian soldiers, 200,000 strong, with a tiny officer elite. 2% of the army was white British. 98% was sepoys. It's extraordinary when you think about it. It's completely incomprehensible in many ways today, and yet that is what happened. 1803, at the Battle of Delhi, near the Noida golf course today, the British moved in. And then something, again, equally improbable happened. The British officers who were supposed to maintain this corporation in Delhi were so taken by the civilization of the city, which revived as peace came. It had gone through 100 years of Marathas coming one year, the Afghans and Ahmad Shah Abdali looting backwards and forwards. And one thing that can be said is that this was a moment that was called the Golden Calm, when for 50 years no army looted the city. And people came back, and the city was repopulated. And at the center of this was a series of remarkable emperors who had almost no political power left. The days when the Mughals controlled not just the modern Republic of India, plus Pakistan, plus Bangladesh, plus most of Afghanistan, plus a smither of Iran, were long gone. Now the political authority of the Mughal emperors had shrunk to the walls of Lal Killa, and their privy purses were pathetically inadequate, and yet, by their example, they provoked, as catalysts, the last great renaissance of Urdu and Persian literature in the city. And a series of remarkable intellectuals, poets, and writers flourished in the city, led by poets like the Emperor Shah Alam, who even blinded wrote the first great novel in Urdu, pen named Aftab, and Zafar was famously totally without any political power, unable to build more than a beautiful doorway to a palace in Meroli. It still stands just, encroached on all sides now, unprotected, and one single pavilion in the Red Fort. And yet, by his own example, a poet in 6 languages, a calligrapher, a man who inspired others, there grew up an extraordinary period in the cultural history of the city, when, without any great resources of finance, without any great armies, without political power, one of the great moments of Indian civilization developed in the city, and Urdu poetry and music was its greatest attribute and achievement.
So, I think the kind of music that we practice even today, what we celebrate is classical or semi-classical music. I think somewhere it all started there, particularly during the reign of Muhammad Shah.
Much misunderstood, much
Much
mocked, and yet he was the man who brought the tabla and the sitar from folk music into court.
Right. And also the fact that something that even as, as musicians that we struggle with even today, patrons, he was one of those people who nurtured, understood, and invested in the idea of what today we are enjoying and celebrating as Indian culture, and the kind of music that is practiced in North India, whether it's the Khayal or what is very lackadaisically written off as semi-classical or light classical music, the music of the tawaifs or the courtesans, which brought alive mehfils and very often would be accompanied with dance as well. I will sing a Dadra. It's very hard to imagine what might have been Dadra at that time, so many hundreds of years ago. And this is one that I particularly like. And I would like you all to imagine that there's a Kathak happening along with it. Perhaps there will be a time when I will also attempt some.
Shoves up for the range dances for us next time.
Jadu Dara Jadu Dara Balam Matware Jadu dara dara jadu dara jadu dara matware balam jadu dara balam balam jadu कैसा जादू डारा बालम मतवारे, कैसा जादू डारा बालम मतवारे, कैसा जादू डारा बालम मतवारे, बालम मतवारे, बालम मतवारे, बालम मतवारे, बालम मतवारे। हाँ कैसा जादू डाला बालम मतवारे। कैसा जादू डारा बालम मतवारे, बालम मतवारे, बालम मतवारे, बालम मतवारे, बालम मतवारे। हाँ कैसा जादू डारा बालम। तुम्हारी मस्त नजर मस्तियाँ लुटाती है, तुम्हारी मस्त नजर मस्तियाँ लुटाती है, दिलों जिगर पे मेरे बिजलियाँ गिराती है, तुम्हारी मस्त नजर मस्तियाँ लुटाती है, दिलों जिगर पे मेरे बिजलियाँ गिराती है, जो बन के रखवारे। हाँ कैसा जादू डारा बालम मतवारे, बालम मतवारे, बालम मतवारे।
In 1852, Mirza Jawad Bak, the son of Maharaja Zafar, by Zinat Mahal, got married. And the least surprising of the many things that happened in the course of the wedding ceremony was a massive spat between the two greatest poets in Delhi, Zafar and Khayal. Almost everything about the two men's styles and backgrounds contained the possibility for disagreement. Zafar wrote verse of startling simplicity, while Ghalib's verse was notoriously complex. Zafar was from a humble background. His father had been a common foot soldier, but it was he not the self-consciously aristocratic Ghalib, who'd been made Zafar's ustad in poetry and so poet laureate of Mughal Delhi. Moreover, while Zauq led a quiet and simple life, composing verse from dusk until dawn, rarely straying from the simple, tiny courtyard where he worked, Ghalib was very proud of his reputation as a rake. Only 5 years before the wedding, Ghalib had been imprisoned for gambling and subsequently wore the affair, deeply embarrassing at the time, as a badge of honor. When someone once praised the poetry of the pious Sheikh Sabai in his presence, Ghalib shot back, "How can Sabai be a poet? He has never tasted wine, nor has he ever gambled, nor has he ever been beaten with slippers by lovers, nor has he even once seen the inside of a jail," which is as good a definition of a poet as I've ever heard. Elsewhere in his reputation, Ghalib makes great play of his reputation as a ladies' man. To one close friend whose mistress had just died, and who had written to Ghalib from the depths of despair, Ghalib replied, "Mirza Sahib, cut it out. I don't like the way you're going on. In the days of my lusty youth, the man of perfect wisdom counselled me, abstinence I do not approve, dissoluteness I do not forbid. Eat, drink, and be merry. But remember, the wise fly settles on the sugar and never on the honey." Well, I have always acted on this counsel. Give thanks to God for your freedom and do not grieve. When I think of paradise and consider how, if my sins are forgiven and I am installed in a palace with a houri to live forever in that worthy woman's company, I am filled with fear and dismay. How wearisome to always find her there, a greater burden than a man could bear. The same old palace, all of emerald made, the same old fruit tree to cast its shade, and God preserve her from all harm, the same old houri on my arm. Come to your senses, brother, and take another. Take a new woman with each returning spring, for last year's almanac is a useless thing.
आज होते तो शायद you would have had a thing or two to say about Valentine's Day. Well, I'm going to attempt a rather sober Ghalib. This is a composition of Begum Akhtar's, and it's a beautiful poem. And it's also indicative of the genius that he was. So. दिल ही तो है न संगो खिश्त, दर्द से भरना आए क्यों। दिल ही तो है न संगो खिश्त, दर्द से भरना आए क्यों। बैठे हैं रह गुजर के हम, कोई हमें उठाए क्यों। दिल ही तो है न संगो खिश्त। आएंगी नहीं होंगी तो हम नहीं करेंगे, मुझे समझ में आ रही क्यों, क्या बात है। देर नहीं हरम नहीं, देर नहीं हरम नहीं, दर नहीं आसमान नहीं, बैठे हैं रहे गुजर पे हम, कोई हमें सताए क्यों, दिल ही तो है न संग दर्द से भरना आए क्यों। हयातो बंद हम, असल में दोनों एक हैं, हयातो बंद हम, असल में दोनों एक हैं, मौत से पहले आदमी गम से निजात पाने क्यों, बैठे हैं गुजर पे हम, कोई हमें सताए क्यों, रोएंगे हम हजार बार, कोई हमें सताए क्यों, दिल ही तो है। कौन से काम बंद है, रोइए जार जार क्या कीजिए हार हार क्यों, बैठे रह गुजर पे हम, कोई हमें सताए क्यों, दिल भी तो है न संग
We think of Mughal Delhi as a place of decadent refinement. What we don't think about is the major intellectual center. But it was. Henry Sleeman was one of the least attractive colonial officials of the time, the man who possibly invented the entire thug panic in the 1830s. But this is what he writes about education in Delhi at this time. Perhaps there are few communities in the world among whom education is more generally diffused than among the Mohammedans of North India. He who holds an office worth 20 rupees a month commonly gives his sons an education equal to that of one of our prime ministers. They learn, through the medium of Arabic and Persian languages, what our young men in our colleges learn through those of Greek and Latin, that is grammar, rhetoric, and logic. After 7 years of study, the young Mohammedan binds his turban upon the head almost as filled with the things which appertain to those branches of learning as a young man raw from Oxford. And he will talk as fluently about Socrates and Aristotle, Plato and Hippocrates, Galen and Avicenna, alias Socrates, Aristoteles, Aflatun, Bocrates, Jalinus, and Pu Alicen. And, what is much more to his advantage in India, the languages in which he has learned are those which he will require throughout his working life, as opposed to that which the English learned. Delhi attracted the talent from all around North India. One such was Altaf Hussain Hali, who fled his marriage in Panipat to walk 53 miles to Delhi, alone and penniless and sleeping rough, in an attempt to realize his dream of studying at the famous colleges there. Everyone wanted me to look for a job, he wrote, but my passion for learning prevailed. Delhi, he said, was a celebrated intellectual center, and in the early 1850s was at its peak of its cultural vitality. It had 6 famous madrasas and at least 4 smaller ones, 9 newspapers in Urdu and Persian, 5 intellectual journals published out of Delhi College, innumerable printing presses and publishers, and 130 Unani Hakims. Here, many of the new wonders of Western science were being translated for the first time into Arabic and Persian. And in the many colleges and madrasas, an air of intellectual open-mindedness and excitement was palpable. But the biggest draw of all were the poets and intellectuals, men such as Ghalib, Zork, Sabai, and Azurda. By some good fortune, wrote Hali, there gathered at this time in the capital Delhi a band of men so talented that their meetings and assemblies were called the great days of Akbar and Shah Jahan. Hali's family and his wife eventually tracked him down. But before they found him and hauled him back to married life in the Mofussil, he was able to gain admittance to the very spacious and beautiful, as he wrote, madrasa of Hussain Bakhsh and begin his studies there. I saw with my own eyes this last brilliant glow of learning in Delhi, he wrote, the thought of which now makes my heart crack with regret. So what happened, of course, was 1857. And in response to the increasing arrogance and increasing evangelicalism of the East India Company, and the fact that the officers were reading to the sepoys the 10 Commandments and sermons on parade, as well as making them famously use the new Lee Enfield bullets, which involve biting the cartridge. The phrase biting the bullet comes from covered in allegedly pig and cow. Whether it was or not, it is disgusting. And even the English soldiers refused to bite these cartridges, which had been, there was some manufacturing error in the dum-dum arsenal. So these things came not lightly greased, but with sort of clugs and Vaseline on them. It was disgusting to touch this stuff. And so, famously, on the evening of the 10th of May, 1857, the sepoys in Meerut were issued this rifle. Veterans who had fought in Afghanistan and risked their lives for this bizarre operation refused to bite the bullet. They carried off to jails. That evening, they were sprung by their colleagues while the white officers were in church at evening service. And the great uprising began.
So, music and poetry played a very powerful part during this time. There are a few songs that I would like to sing for you in the course of the evening. The first one is called 1857 के क्रांतिकारियों का अभियान गीत. It's essentially the Jhanda Gaan or the flag song, and it was written by a soldier who was in Nana Sahib's army. His name was Azimullah Khan. तर्ज तो मैंने अपने हिसाब से बनाई है, but I'll sing you a few verses from that Jhanda or flag song. Would you like to say something about Azimullah Khan?
Look, Azimullah Khan, interesting character, someone who deserves a book on his own sometime. But he was a intellectual who went to London, had a raging affair with a British woman called Lucy Duff Gordon, who herself was a great intellectual and writer, and therefore had a view of Britain very intimately and as a flawed and human place, not as something distant and invincible. And moreover, on his way back to India, stopped off at the Crimean War and saw the catastrophe being faced by the British Army in the Crimea, dying of cholera, badly served without any medical issues, and being frequently massacred, as in the charges that I gave, by Russian cavalry. So he came back here aware that there was an alternative possible, there was nothing impossible, and that if people played their cards right, they could gain their freedom.
Right. हम हैं इसके मालिक, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. हम हैं इसके मालिक, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. हम हैं इसके मालिक, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. पाक वतन का कौम का जन्नत से भी न्यारा. पाक वतन का कौम है, कौम का जन्नत से भी न्यारा. हम हैं इसके मालिक, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. ये हमारी मिल्कियत, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. ये हमारी मिल्कियत, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. इसकी रूहानियत से रोशन है जग सारा. इसकी रूहानियत से रोशन है जग सारा. हम हैं इसके मालिक, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. हम हैं इसके मालिक, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. कितना कदीम, कितना नईम, सब दुनिया से प्यारा. कितना कदीम, कितना नईम, सब दुनिया से प्यारा. करती है जरखेज जिसे गंगो जमुनों की धारा. करती है जरखेज जिसे गंगो जमुनों की धारा. हम हैं इसके मालिक, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. हम हैं इसके मालिक, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. पाक वतन का कौम का जन्नत से भी न्यारा. हम हैं इसके मालिक, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. ऊपर बर्फीला पर्वत है, पहरेदार हमारा. ऊपर बर्फीला पर्वत है, पहरेदार हमारा. नीचे साहिल पर बजता है सागर का नगारा. नीचे साहिल पर बजता है सागर का नगारा. हम हैं इसके मालिक, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. हम हैं इसके मालिक, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. आया फिरंगी दूर से, आया फिरंगी दूर से, ऐसा मंतर फेरा. आया फिरंगी दूर से, ऐसा मंतर फेरा. लूटा दोनों पाक वतन है कौम का जन्नत से भी न्यारा। हम हैं इसके मालिक, हम हैं इसके मालिक, हम हैं इसके मालिक, हिंदुस्तान हमारा।
The uprising broke out and spread like wildfire. Of the 164,000 sepoys in the Bengal army, 139,000 mutinied and turned their guns on their officers. Of those 139,000, 100,000 came to death. So today, when you're told that the Mughals are foreign invaders and all the rest of it, an army which was 90% Brahmin and Rajput marched to fight under Zafar. What you hear in the textbooks about Mangal Pandi was a sideshow and is not referred to in any of the documents in the 60 papers in the archives. The truth is, Delhi was the center of the uprising against the British, and they came to Zafar because they regarded him as a legitimate monarch, not something you will read in a textbook today. However, the uprising was ill-managed and a catastrophe. There was no clear military chain of command. The Mughal princes squabbled among themselves, and the different regiments which marched on Delhi refused to cooperate with each other. There was an attempt to put Bak Khan in charge, but many didn't obey him. And all the gains that every day were gained by the sepoys when they fought their way up the ridge to the British position at the top of the ridge were lost when, ridiculously, they marched down back into the city every night. So it was a military catastrophe, and by August, supplies began to run out. Firework makers began to be employed to make ammunition, which was inferior in quality. And when the harvest came, most of the sepoys went back to their villages, and the army shrunk from about 150,000 with 100,000 sepoys at its core to about half that by August or September. Meanwhile, the British got their act together, gathered a new army from the Pashtun hills and from the Punjab, and marched down the Grand Trunk Road with a whole series of huge artillery pieces from Ferozpur, which they put up at the end of August in front of Kashmiri Gate, the ISBT today, and began to pound the city and went in on the 11th of September. No one was spared. Everyone was considered a legitimate target. Today, you often hear in Gaza reports that everyone is regarded as guilty party. This was very much the attitude of the British in Delhi. Here is the account by one young officer, Edward Vibart, who had all his sisters killed in the outbreak. He says, the orders went out to shoot every soul. It was literally murder. I've seen many bloody and awful sights lately, but one such as I witnessed yesterday, I pray I never see again. The women were all spared, but their screams on seeing their husbands and sons butchered was most painful. Heaven knows I feel no pity when some old grey-bearded man is brought out from his hiding place and shot before your very eyes. Hard does me that man's heart, I think, who can look on with indifference. After the army had seized control, they marched out towards, to follow the rebel army to Lucknow, where they had gone to make their last stand. And scenes of horror unfolded as the regiments marched through the streets over the dead bodies which had been left out. The march was simply awful, wrote Richard Barter. Our advance guard, consisting of cavalry and artillery, had burst and squashed the dead bodies, which lay swelled to an enormous size in the Chandni Chowk. And the stench was fearful. Men and officers were sick all round, and I thought we'd never get through the city. It was a ride I don't care ever to take again, and the horse felt it as much as I did, for he snorted and shook as he slid rather than walked over the abominations with which the streets were covered. Dead bodies were strewn about in all directions, in every attitude that the death struggle had caused them to assume, in every stage of decomposition. In many instances, the positions of the body were appallingly lifelike. Some lay with their arms uplifted as if beckoning, and indeed the whole scene was weird and terrible, beyond description. The atmosphere was unimaginably disgusting, laden as it was with the most noxious and sickening odors.
Oh. So ironically, one of the things that happened was in the second decade of the 20th century, the British conducted a very elaborate linguistic survey. And the survey was conducted pretty much by this one ethnographer called Mughal, who moved around with one machine across the country and collected various dialects. The idea was to collect language. And some of the songs that were recorded as part of this survey very much come from that time of 1857. And this one that I'm going to sing for you is on the Meerat Ka Gadar, and it's clearly the women who are crying about what has happened. And it was recorded like a poem by a school teacher in Saharanpur. So just to give you an idea of how much all this has traveled geographically, through time, historically. So. मेरे सैया लूटे न जाने मेरठ का सदर बाजार है मेरे सैया लूटे न जाने लोगों ने लूटे शाले दो शाले लोगों ने लूटे शाले दो शाले मेरे प्यारे ने लूटा रुमाल मेरठ का सदर बाजार है मेरे सैया लूटे न जाने लोगों ने लूटे शाले तो शाले मेरे सैया सैया लूटे न जाने मेरठ का सदर बाजार है मेरे सैया लूटे न जाने लोगों ने लूटे गोले छुआरे मेरठ का सदर बाजार है मेरे सैया, हाँ सैया 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 मेरे सैया टूटे न जाने, मेरे सैया ने लूटे न जाने, लोगों ने लूटे मोहरे अशरफिया मेरे प्यारे ने न नहीं लूटा, मेरठ का सदर बाजार है मेरे सैया, मेरे सैया मेरे सैया लूटे न जाने।
Zafar took shelter in Humayun's tomb and was arrested by Hodson. The following day, Hodson went back and arrested the Mughal prisoners. On the way back, Kuni Darwaza, seeing that there were a large crowd was gathering, he ordered the princes out of their palanquin, produced his Colt revolver, shot them at point-blank range, and dumped the naked bodies of the Kotwal, having looted first all their earrings and jewelry. Zafar was put on trial and accused of masterminding the entire revolt, which was nonsense. He was an unwilling participator, and the whole thing had come as an enormous surprise to him. But a trumped-up trial was put on, and he had been promised his life, so he couldn't be hung, as happened to most of the others, but he was sentenced to exile in Burma. The night before he left, he was visited in the stables where the British kept him by William Howard Russell, who was a war journalist who invented war journalism, covered first the Crimean War, and then came to Delhi. And he'd been given this image of this sort of, remember in the James Bond film, that figure Blofeld with his white sort of cat stroking in the James Bond baddie headquarters. Russell was clearly expecting something like that, some mastermind, an enormous conspiracy stretching to Mecca in the prosecutor's imagination. In reality, what he saw, and he records, was an old man crouched on his haunches, diminutive and attenuated, dressed in an ordinary and rather dirty muslin tunic, his small, lean feet bare, his head covered by a small, thin, cambric skull cap. Not a word came from his lips. In utter silence, he sat day and night, with his eyes cast on the ground, as though utterly oblivious to the conditions in which he was placed. His eyes had the dull, filmy look of very old age, which seems as if it were to guide us into the great darkness. Some heard him quoting verses of his own composition, writing poetry on a wall with a burnt stick.
William had mentioned White Officer and Hari. Hari reads this really powerful lament of the Skira, which is on the death of Delhi. तो उसके कुछ अशआर आपको सुनाते हैं. आप लोग थोड़ी देर बैठेंगे कि बैठ सकते हैं? Just checking on time. Officially we came late, so speaking of time. No, please. Not at all. वो मेरा इशारा बिल्कुल भी नहीं था, ना इरादा था। ना सुना जाएगा हमसे ये फसाना हरगिज़, ना सुना जाएगा हमसे ये फसाना हरगिज़। तज़किरा दहलीए मरहूम खाए दोस्त न छेड़, ना सुना जाएगा हमसे ये फसाना हरगिज़। चप्पे चप्पे पे गोरे अपता तहफा, चप्पे चप्पे पे गोरे अपता तहफा। दफन होगा कहीं इतना ना खजाना हरगिज़, दफन होगा कहीं इतना ना खजाना हरगिज़। ना सुना जाएगा हमसे ये फसाना हरगिज़। गालिबो शेफ्ताओं नयरो आजुर्दार सो, गालिबो शेफ्ताओं नयरो आजुर्दार सो। अब दिखाएगा ये शक्लें न ज़माना हरगिज़, अब दिखाएगा ये शक्लें न ज़माना हरगिज़। ना सुना जाएगा हमसे ये फसाना हरगिज़। रात आखिर हुई, रात आखिर हुई और बज़्म सुखन है खाली। या मुनासिब नहीं रो रो के रुलाना हरगिज़, या मुनासिब नहीं रो रो के रुलाना हरगिज़। तज़किरा दहलीए मरहूम खाए दोस्त न छेड़, न सुना जाएगा हमसे ये फसाना हरगिज़।
Writing poetry on the wall with a burnt stick. Those verses are not in Zafar's Diwan, but according to tradition, they begin to be recited on the steps of the Jama Masjid within 10 years of his death. There is a dispute whether the famous Dogazmin, these last couplets of Zafar, are legitimate or not, and different scholars take different views of this. But they're very beautiful, and my favorite translation of them was given to me by the novelist Ahmed Ali, who wrote Twilight of Delhi, the greatest of all Delhi novels, in Karachi when I went to see him in about 1990. And he was playing with different versions of it. And he gave me this typescript, which I'll read to you, and then Vidya will end the evening by singing.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I would really like to sing the Dirge of the Begum. You know, you've been talking about Badshahs going away, Zafar going away to. So.
Read time?
I'll just take 2 minutes. 2 minutes? Because it's actually. Thank you, this is very encouraging. But also the poem is very, very poignant, you know. It talks about Namak Harami. It talks about the Lad Sahib. So, as a smaller narrative, it still brings so much meaning to what was happening then, particularly in the context of Zafar going away. So, 2 minutes. अब कैसी करी हो निमक हरामी देसवा बेगाना कर दी हो गलियन गलियन रैयत रोवे हटिया बनिया बाजार ने अब कैसे करी हो निमक हरामी देसवा बेगाना कर दी हो रे गलियन गलियन रैयत रोवे हटिया बनिया बाजार ने अब कैसे करी हो निमक महल में बैठी बेगम महल में बैठी बेगम तेरी पैरों में नमाज रे मोती महल की बैठक छोटी छोटी बीना बाजार रे कैसी करी हो निमक हरामी देसवा बेगाना कर दी हो कैसी करी हो निमक हरामी देसवा बेगाना कर दी हो क्या करो the women's voice has to be force of habit.
So Ahmed Ali turned these last couplets into a rather sort of Tennysonian poem, which he gave me, and I will read you now his rendering of Zafar's last verses. And then we'll go to the...
Sure, absolutely.
This is dedicated to Zeenat now, and he, in old age, is thinking back. When, in silk, you came and dazzled me with the beauty of your spring, you brought a flower to bloom, love within my being. You lived with me, breath of my breath, being in my being, nor left my side. But now the wheel of time has turned, and you are gone. No joy abide. You pressed your lips upon my lips, your heart upon my beating heart. And I have no wish to fall in love again. For they who sold love's remedy have shut shop, and I seek in vain. My life now brings no ray of light. I bring no solace to heart or eye. Out of dust to dust again, of no use to anyone am I. Delhi was once a paradise where love held sway and reigned. But its charms lie ravished, and only ruins remain. And they're being tidied up by the DDA even as we speak. No tears were shed when shroudless they were laid in common graves. No prayers were read for the noble dead, unmarked remained their graves. The heart distressed, the wounded flesh, the mind ablaze, the rising sigh, the drop of blood, the broken heart, tears on the lashes of the eye. But things cannot remain, O Zafar, thus, for who can tell? Through God's great mercy and the prophet, all may yet be well.
We end this evening with a ghazal by Zafar. So, this was sung by Muhammad Saab in 1968 Lal Killa. So, उसी के कुछ शेर करेंगे, begin with it. You'll have to लगता लगता नहीं है उजड़े किसकी बनी है कह दो इन हसरतों से कहीं और जाओ से, कह दो इन हसरतों से कहीं और जाओ से, इतनी जगह कहाँ है दिले दागदार में, लगता नहीं है कितना है बदनसीब ज़फ़र, कितना है बदनसीब ज़फ़र, दफ्न के दो गज ज़मीन भी नहीं, दो गज ज़मीन भी